I stand here today as the architect of stories of the Haven Wolverhampton, and I'd like to share with you the story of Jack and Jill, who got married on a hill and lived together not quite so happily ever after. We'll start with Jack. At the age of 6, he discovered his love for dance, ballet to be precise. He desperately wanted to join a dance class. Dad was not so keen. He told Jack that ballet is for girls. He preferred football. A group of dads had organized a football club, and Jack really enjoyed going with Dad every Saturday as they got to spend some quality time together. One day, Jack fell and he hurt his knee on the pitch. As he cried, Dad helped him up and told him to man up and not be such a girl. He smiled, they high-fived, and Jack was back in the game in no time. On Saturday mornings, whilst the boys were out playing football, Jack's mom was really fond of baking. One wet and windy November morning, football was cancelled, and Jack really wanted to help Mom with the baking, but he was told he doesn't belong in the kitchen. Occasionally, Jack will dance around in his bedroom pretending to be Billy Elliot, but he'll listen out for footsteps because he didn't want to be caught doing such a girly activity. By the age of 13, he'd embraced boys' toys and was now a reclusive video game addict. At 19, he had given up his childhood dream of owning his own dance studio, and he was off to university to study chemical engineering and make Dad proud. And then there's Jill. At the age of 6, she protested rather loudly that she hated pink and girls' clothes. She preferred boys' clothes because they were more fun and, let's face it, more practical. For Jumper Day, she wanted the interactive cheeky little monster jumper, you know, the one with zip for teeth. You unzip the teeth and the monster's tongue falls out. She thought it was funny. Mom was not so keen. And so off she went in her pink and fluffy jumper. 3 Christmases in a row, all Jill ever wanted was a Transformer toy. Yet year after year, Santa delivered dolls, cookery sets, and more pink and fluffy jumpers. One year when she unwrapped a smiley toy Hoover and a matching dustpan and brush set, she'd had enough and she just wanted Christmas cancelled because, let's face it, who wants to pretend to do domestic chores for fun? At the age of 13, she decided that she wanted to start a newspaper round because she thought it was an opportunity for her to earn some extra pocket money. Even though Mom was prepared to explore this with her, Dad didn't think it was very safe for her to do so, and unless he was available to accompany her, he didn't want her to go. Of course, he wasn't available, and so Jill wasn't able to do her newspaper round. Instead, when she was meant to be in the library, she'd sneak into the coding club, and she forgot to tell Mom and Dad about it because she didn't think they'd be too impressed. By 19, like Jack, she too was off to university, and in her case, she was off to study design technology. At the age of 22, they found themselves together, Jack and Jill, in the same university by some strange coincidence. 3 years later, the lovebirds were still dating. Jack was miserably employed as a quality manager at an engineering company. Jill was a developer with a local design agency, and she also freelanced as a technical writer with a gaming magazine. 6 years later, now expecting their second child, Jill begins to realize that Jack isn't necessarily who she expected to spend her forever with. Jill thought she'd have it all. When he proposed, she said yes, because that's what you do, isn't it? It seemed like a natural progression. They'd been dating a while. You get married. But she thought she'd have it all. She thought she'd have the family, the career, the marriage. And as time went on, she realized within the relationship that things were not really working in her favor, because Jack really wanted somebody who was very much like his mother, a homemaker who was dedicated to her family. Jack and Jill were definitely tumbling down the hill. Life isn't always a fairy tale, and I wish it was as simple as a nursery rhyme. Jack and Jill are not an anomaly. Perhaps you identify with their story. Maybe you're a Jack or a Jill. Maybe you see yourselves in their parents. More than likely, someone sitting here today has told an assertive little girl like young Jill that she's too bossy. Or a sensitive boy like young Jack that he's a wimp and he shouldn't be such a girl. Or maybe you're one of those who thinks that toys are gendered. So boys get all the fun-packed, mechanical, interactive toys, and girls, like Jill, get dolls and hoovers. I'd like us to ask ourselves, what are we trying to achieve when we allow boys to get away with microaggressive behaviors, because boys will be boys? And yet, we silence and stifle our daughters by teaching them to be submissive in servitude. What are we trying to achieve when our sons' masculinity overrides and erodes our daughters' humanity? How did a whole generation work so hard to center the empowerment of women and the girl child, yet neglect to center men's understanding of living with empowered women? If you socialize boys like Jack to think of women as being less than, how do you then expect them to grow up to be men who see women as equals, that are deserving of respect? Most people think that the feminist agenda is to take over and conquer the world. But the reality is, most women just want to live their lives to the fullest, to be independent, to be able to walk home without the potent fear of violence and abuse. According to the 10-year femicide census, 92% of women met their end in the hands of men who were lovers, husbands, in some instances, fathers, brothers. In other words, men that they once loved and trusted. If we we begin to rethink our ideas around how we define masculinity and refocus our ideas around power, we can begin to see the end of violence against women and girls. Because though all of these behaviors sound like just, general bad behavior that have somehow become the norm, they speak to a wider culture that often give men a slap on the wrist in the best case scenario, or not hold them accountable at all. Now, at the Haven, we believe that we have to men-gage in order to empower her. Men-gage, empower her. And so we're going into your schools and speaking to young boys and girls to get them to critically analyze how they view gender norms and gender stereotypes. We want a world where boys like Jack can understand that being masculine doesn't mean that you have to be repressive emotionally. It doesn't mean that you cannot express yourself, that you cannot express your fears. We need more enabling environments that encourage young boys to speak up, to be emotional without being repressive, to be allies in the face of discrimination and bias. Now, imagine if Jack rejected his patriarchal power over Jill and instead works together with her to collaborate in an understanding that neither can do it alone. You need each other and you need to work together in collaboration. Maybe Jill would be able to go back to a job that she loves, and Jack would be able to stay at home and support Jill with taking care of the children without feeling emasculated by the idea of, the optics of being a stay-at-home dad. I imagine a world where I can be assertive, fearless, and unapologetic in my resolve as my male peers without being considered butch and aggressive. I imagine a world where being masculine doesn't have to be synonymous with physical strength, power, and control, or being emotionally repressive. Now, that is a world that I would love to live in. Wouldn't you?